when you look at a blockchain system, it goes beyond just moving value around from person to person. The goal of Cardano is to be the foundation upon which all the economic, political, and social systems of the world rest. That's where we want to go. And if that's the case, every person in the world needs to know what the rules are and what the system can protect. And the magic of blockchains, unlike traditional governance systems, is instead of don't be evil, they can't be evil. Algorithmically speaking, they will behave as intended. Whether it be the monetary supply, so we can have sound money, or it can be the fact that your dApps can't be censored or deplatformed because they're inconvenient to a particular power group or regime. That's why we need a constitution. And it's a tremendously difficult thing to write because you have to write it for the world, not just a nation.
What's up, Beta Gang? Welcome into Adapt Central, your home for everything blockchain and crypto. I'm your host here, Fareed. We are live here, not at the typical times that we typically go live. However, we've got an interesting bit of content coming in here from the Cardano Foundation, which is the official reveal and the review of the 2025 Cardano roadmap and vision here for the future. And we're going to be hearing from the CTO of the Cardano Foundation, none other than Giorgio Zanetti. There's also going to be Sebastian Guillemot, one of the core founders of Paima, a gaming studio and a platform here within the Cardano ecosystem. And I want to say there may be a couple of other people involved there as well, but we're going to get to hear directly from the foundation as to what they believe and where they currently see Cardano going here and what some of the key focuses are going to be in the ecosystem moving forward. So if it's your first time stopping by, and we're going to get started in just a moment, please smash that thumbs up on the way in. I do definitely appreciate it. If you guys want more content just like this, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to voice off and just join the live conversation. Again, we're going to review, tune in, listen to this together. And then once everything wraps up, we'll go ahead and just sort of recap and potentially touch on some of the key things that you may or may not have agreed on. So let me just double check here. The stream should be kicking off here momentarily. And if it hasn't already started, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and actually take a look at some recent content that was just released by the foundation. Now, if you are watching live, oh, I think we actually are live. So we're going to go ahead and tune in now.
This founder of DC, Spark, and Paima. My name is Jacob. I'm the social media manager here at CF. And today we're going to do a little tier list of Cardano's product roadmap. You want to tell us some more about that, Giorgio?
Yes, absolutely. So this was this idea originated in Japan, in Tokyo, a few weeks ago, where I was with Yuta and Seba. And Yuta asked us to kind of rank the items in the roadmap for the budget, and we came up with this idea of the tier list to make it a bit more fun and engaging. And since then, I think many more people have contributed to this tier list. And yeah, we thought it would be fun to redo this format in a more thought-through way, not just on the spot. And I thought, who better than Seba and Matthias to invite to do this? So I just want to disclaim that all of our views are just ours, and you might disagree with us. This should not be, it's not an endorsement or like a disavowalment of anything. So it's just helping educate D-reps on the innovations. And usually engineers are not very good at business stuff, so maybe it's just a technical angle. Yeah, I hope you have fun and you come up with your tier list as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it. Here, let's put this stream list.
Yes, yeah, let's jump right into it. So I vibe code this afternoon, this tier list, so I hope it's not buggy. In case it is, I have a backup spreadsheet. So let's go item by item. So we could quickly explain what each item is. Maybe we can take turns, the three of us, and then we can give our own thoughts on which rank this item would live in. So the first one is state machine contract environment, and this is a piece of on the Hydra protocol. I don't know, maybe Matthias, you want to start? You are a Hydra person. How can I say? You worked on Hydra. How do you see this piece of foundational research?
Well, first, I don't quite see why it's specific to Hydra, to be honest. And I mean, we have got state machine abstractions in the past on Cardano, and they have proven to be quite more expensive in the end than the alternative, because they are usually not, first-class citizen in terms of support. So I think there is room for doing that better. But like, if by state machine contract environment we kind of include more generic stuff like actual new ways of maybe writing smart contract for Cardano, which will be reusing the UTXO in a better way, or leveraging that better with a completely different VM possibly. I think that could be quite high on the list, because that's both something which is quite tangible and could solve really interesting problems in terms of compositions and so on for the smart contract space. So at least B tier for me.
Yeah, if I can add to that as well, this is something that we've also looked into. So this is as Christos mentioned, there's a few different projects that have tried this in various ways. One of the reasons it's a bit difficult is because in Icon and Plus you have to carry over states manually, so these become a bit hard to write by hand, and so people want to have frameworks to handle these state machines with less programmer effort. The problem is, of course, this layers of abstraction usually end up adding cost. This was part of our motivation for building Starstream, which you might have heard of, which is the new VM we're building that's UTXO based, where we model these state machines as coroutines, specifically try and solve this problem. And part of the reason this is related to Hydra is that if you do something like Starstream and add it to the Cardano layer 1, then Hydra automatically gets it, because Hydra is kind of an isomorphic layer 2. That is to say, it reuses the Cardano environment. So there are some connections in there. Now, I think this proposal came independently from the work we were doing. I think this came originally from some of the more Hydra-focused people. But I think it generally shows that there's multiple different teams interested in trying to make these state machines work better. Of course, then the question becomes, which approach do we want to prioritize? And I think that's maybe the point that's less expanded upon in this budget item. Therefore, I think conceptually it's a high priority, because a lot of people independently have said they wanted this. So clearly there's a large demand. It's just that, we, from this specific budget item, is a bit more vague. It's more of like on exploratory side in the way it's worded. So I'd say like maybe B or C because of that.
All right. Yeah, let's park it in B, and then we see. I don't want everything in A or everything in one bucket, so we can discuss it later.
Hey, folks, for anybody who's just tuning in, and I just briefly muted the audio, we're going through a tier ranking list from the foundation, basically breaking down Cardano's future vision and the roadmap. So again, thanks everybody for tuning in. Once this sort of concludes, we're going to tune back in and recap and break down some of the key highlights here in terms of priority and ranking. Development.
So this is clearly something important. I don't know what's missing. So I can go ahead and also put it in the B tier. Is an important initiative, but I don't know what's the definition of done here.
Yeah, I think something that generally applies to all the Hydra related proposals is that Hydra at this point has been a project ongoing for a few years. And as you know, there's things that have been built with Hydra so far, like the Doom on Hydra demo that was built. And there's some people that want to do more stuff with Hydra. Like I know there's people trying to work on DEXs and these kinds of things. That being said, I believe we're kind of in a year of productization for Hydra, where there's been enough R&D work that we have kind of an idea of the concept and how it works. And our focus now should be trying to, as an ecosystem, productize this if we think it's worth productizing. One thing I think is missing from the Hydra-related budget proposals is any sense of KPI or end result, right? As an R&D item that's been in the works for a few years, I would like to see like, okay, if we have another year of Hydra research work, this is what we expect as the end result. And I think some of these proposals are a bit more on the research side. That's to say, like, oh, like it would be cool if we had this. And although I can definitely understand that, I would rather come at it from the inverse direction, which is like, there's this product that we think could be built with Hydra within a year, and maybe it requires this extra tech to build. And so for the Hydra related stuff, I would like, whoever's focusing on those efforts to maybe try and propose a more concrete product version of what these roadmap items will bring to the community, because otherwise it's a bit hard to think about like the impact these will have as a budget item.
But this will probably fall outside of the roadmap. It would be more builders and catalyst type of innovation, right? I build a DEX with Hydra, I build a video game with Hydra.
Yeah, it's less about funding product ideas in the roadmap itself. It's about laying out concrete products that could be built if we spend another year of research on this, right? Because we want to convince the community, like, hey, this money's being spent because it will enable these new things that require another year of work.
Exactly. I mean, if you want use cases, you need sometimes, necessary updates to the existing stack to enable this. And given that today Hydra is literally the only scalability solution that we have that is usable right now, to me, it's a top priority. People started using it. It took quite a while in the end to get adoption on the Hydra space. And now we're seeing more and more people building on that. So it's time to kind of use that momentum and do something with that solution. Scale it in terms of its features, its usability. And so that's a top priority, if not an immediate imperative, because we won't have another chance to get people onboarded to Hydra, right? If we put some effort into that in 5 years, that's too late. So it's right now, and that will help for other L2 solutions that are coming after that.
Okay. So do we agree and put it in A tier with the caveat that is not research anymore, but it's just getting things done and make it to use? Would it be fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, great.
There's a few more Hydra stuff. One is, where is it? Optimization tools. This is about making the family of Hydra smooth operation, Hydra network, locking collateral funds. Is this something that goes in the direction of what we discussed?
It's the exact same thing as what we discussed. I mean, Hydra development and that, to me, there is no difference. I'm not even sure whether they are two different items, probably because they were proposed by two different groups. But there's also this same thing.
There's also this auditing tool. I guess this to provide more transparency. Shall we also cluster it in the top A tier? Or is it we don't like this auditing? We like the anonymity of things, obfuscation.
I don't quite see also what is specific to Hydra here, or like what exactly do we call auditing tools here?
I think the TLDR is that the Hydra channels are not very, as today, they're not very easy to understand what happens inside, and the auditing tool would give you this view on what happens, when everything is reconciliated, kind of an explorer for Hydra, if you want. That's my LE5 understanding.
Well, I would argue that's a feature indeed, that you can't necessarily see what's happening in the head. And it sounds also very like application specific. I don't think this has its room on a core item roadmap.
Yeah, I have the same feeling. My feeling related to this is that there will probably be specific index solutions that will come up to try to solve this problem. It's a bit hard to make generic because how many heads will be required, how those heads will be set up, when you add new heads, when you tear stuff down, is, as Matthias mentioned, somewhat application specific. And so I'd probably prefer to see this come from specific business requirements as opposed to building a generic auditing tool and hoping it's what people need for their use case.
Yeah.
Shall
Okay,
we?
F.
F, not recommended. Yeah.
Just,
What
yeah.
do you say, Seba? You also put F, D, C. I was thinking more C would be if we have time, and so. But what do you think, Seba?
Yeah, I think for me it'd be at most a D unless they have a specific auditing tool for a specific use case in mind.
Okay, then let's put it in D. Then we have Hydra Tail and Interhead. Who wants to explain what Hydra Tail is? And it's a foundational research.
Well, that's kind of the point. No one can explain what it is yet. So I'd rather go for the Interhead Hydra. At least I think it's easier to park this one first.
Okay, let's do it.
There's already been a paper on that one. And it's an interesting one. That is a step that will get us closer to having something like a Lightning Network, because right now we can have heads that are fully independent. We can't interconnect them, and therefore we can't have a network of heads, which is a lot more challenging when you start including things like a whole state, right, and not just payments. So I think at the very least we should have the Interhead effort goes into trying to make a payment network, and then see how we can expand that to a full state channel network. It's an interesting one, so definitely important to me, but not necessarily as important as developing what we currently have and sort of trying to build on top of that. So I would say like B or C, possibly just C for now. Like it's cool, but no one also kind of really said they wanted that at this point. So I'm like, yeah.
Seba?
Yeah, I agree on C. I think it's something that theoretically a lot of people have wanted. In practice, it's a bit difficult. So I feel like it's a riskier bet than building use cases that just require the core Hydra as it exists. So I prefer to focus on that before spending work on this Interhead work.
Cool. So Hydra Tail, Matthias, you mentioned.
Yeah, now the
you
tail.
don't know what it is. Maybe Seba, you have more. Can you? What is it? The name suggests is a better way of
I mean,
reconciliating.
I said I don't know what it is because it just doesn't exist, right? It's a resource problem. But what problem is trying to solve is to have a more B2C relationship with Hydra, right? Where you can have a light node or light client connecting to some kind of server in a trustless fashion to do payments with any other accounts or any other people on this particular tail, right? The head is more like a peer-to-peer kind of thing. We both connect, or like a small party, a small group connects into a head and they can exchange between one another. Whereas the tail has this idea of you have some intermediary that can interconnect multiple accounts, and all of that can happen in a trustless fashion, right? And of course, evil lies in the details, because doing something like that is actually quite complicated if you want it to be fully trustless and decentralized. So
my feeling on this one is that it's something that's a bit hard to do without putting a lot of work on the ZK approach. ZK standing for zero knowledge cryptography, which is cryptographic technique. One of the issues around this is how will we properly ZKify Hydra, and I think this is one of the unsolved problems that's kind of blocking this work. There has been some thoughts about how do we ZKify Plutus, working with external provers, and there's been some work on like the Midnight side about how to verify like ZK proofs on Cardano smart contracts. So there's been like some different attempts at taking a stab at this, but I think they all end up being fairly difficult to implement to fully take advantage of the potential of a Hydra Tail protocol. That's why for Starstream, we instead tried to rethink about the design of a ZK VM from scratch to be able to keep the UTXO model, but have it be able to take advantage of these ZK techniques in a way that's much more intuitive, because we've seen a lot of people try different things and none of them went that well because they tried to mangle things to match the current design. So I think probably the more straightforward way to go to implement this kind of Hydra tail would be to connect zkVM like Starstream to one of the nodes that will make it automatically, get supported in Hydra, and then use that to power the Hydra tail protocol, as opposed to trying to implement Hydra tail on the existing system. All that to say is, I think conceptually, I think this is very important. I think a lot of use cases that would like Hydra would benefit greatly from this. I just think that the best way to do this, that gives us the best bang for our buck, is not available today. It'll probably not be available this year. So I put it at like F or D, not because the idea is bad, but I just think it's a bit too early to implement this.
Yeah, I mean, the fun part is 2 years ago, I was working exactly on that, doing some simulation work for one of the first version of that protocol that we thought could be interesting, and the simulation showed that it wouldn't work quite as expected. And I think now, yes, we are people are venturing, or searchers are venturing in the lens of ZK for that, because there isn't need for batching large amount of stuff and so on. So ZK rollups looks like interesting. So it seems that in order to make progress on this area, we have to make progress first on the ZK items, and in particular on doing that in Cardano. So yeah, definitely agree. Like D or F, not recommended would mean we have other problems to solve first before we get back to this problem. It's an interesting one, but it's just that we don't have the tools yet to make it work. And so, once we have good recursive snarks and a very good zero knowledge VM on Cardano, we can rethink about that problem, I think. But for now, there is no point putting that on the roadmap too high.
So let's do F. We have our first F, not recommended item, and as you said, it's not so negative. It's just we need a few more years before this is promoted to the higher tiers.
Yeah, hopefully not a few more years, but yeah, there's some things to be built first.
Well,
that's always what you say first, and then
yeah.
All right, moving on. We have covered all the Hydra stuff. We have location-based services and smart contracts. So this is foundational research.
Yeah.
Who wants?
So, in my opinion, a lot of this revolves around just a generic real-world asset bucket. A lot of people want more real-world assets on Cardano. Some of that is concrete use cases, like wine tracking or verifying diplomas or stable coins. A large variety of real-world asset use cases. Have a large community interest, and real-world asset as a use case is growing a lot as a market segment year over year. So I definitely think more generally, real-world assets are something that we should put more interest in as a community. There's work on that happening in a few different directions now. I know the people at Anastasia Labs are working on some new CIPs related to that to try and have more flexible smart contracts that handle real-world asset use cases. And some of that work will have to be implemented, of course, at the Eigen smart contract level, but some of that work will have to be ecosystem level. It's something that the explorers have to integrate and the wallets have to implement, because there's some new standards required for these. There's other people working on different approaches. So, for example, at Starstream, we're working on, the ZK side of things that can enable different real-world assets that need computation on private data. There's, some sidechain like Midnight trying to tackle this. So I think as an ecosystem, there's a lot of people interested in working on this. Location-based services represent one specific subset of the real-world asset bucket. So I feel like probably this is not the right roadmap item. It's a bit too specific. Rather, I would focus a bit more on what we need to get these use cases enabled, and then put the roadmap item that enables that specifically. Just say, for example, if we believe that the Anastasia Labs work is meaningful, as I mentioned, there's work that needs to be done on the explorers and the wallets and the tooling as an ecosystem to support these new standards. And therefore, the budget should probably go toward giving grants to these projects.
It's interesting because when I read this item, I did not think about real world assets, right? I thought more about proof of attendance or personhood, like things that require geographical pinpointing, a trustless way of saying, okay, this guy was actually there or is in this close to this node, and then you could build on top of it protocols to say, if you deploy your node in Rapa Nui, right, on Easter Island, or you get more traffic rather than if you are in Frankfurt AWS data center. I did not connect it to RWAs, but there might be something there. And
the connection is that for things like traceability, a lot of the traceability is around location of the specific node, and a lot of real world assets require government regulations where data has to be stored or processed in specific countries. But so for a lot of real world asset cases, this is like a key feature.
I looked at the technology a few years ago, and nothing convinced me that it was something realistically doable without, because you can easily relay information and kind of camouflage your position. So I think it would be something helpful, but I don't know how realistic it is to develop. Matthias, do you have any?
Also a research item, right? And the point of research is not to lead to a product. The point of research is just to create knowledge. So in that sense, right, since we don't know how that could work, I think that's a good research item. This is something which clearly could enable some use cases. So I'm a very simple man. Anything that creates use cases to me is a top priority. We need use cases, and that's the thing we need the most. We don't care about scalability if we don't have use cases, right? Your chain can go as fast as it can. If you don't have anyone using it, that's pointless. Okay. So to me, anything that creates a use case is at least an A tier. But this particular item, I think, was also like split kind of in two, and two completely unrelated things. There, like in the description, we mentioned it's for this kind of location-based smart contract thing, and it's also about making sure that we have proper geographical decentralization on the network, which are like two slightly different things to me. So I'm really just talking about the use case one, the use case part here. And so I would say at least A for me.
Okay, Seba, what would you think?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. As I mentioned, there's a lot of interest in this type of work, and there's a lot of companies interested in working on this. I'd be interested to see more concretely how they think about splitting that budget up. But I think conceptually, this is a good idea.
I would say B. Matthias is A. What's Seba? You're the tiebreaker here. A or B?
I would put it in B just because I'm not sure how they plan to split it up. But I think based off of that, I could easily be convinced of an A.
I mean, B is an important initiative. We are not completely discounting them. It also depends. We are not here looking at the price of the line items, right? This is a DREP's job. So I've not looked at how much ADA is. So here's a big one, Leios. I think this one needs the least amount of introduction. Is the most known, right? Is an upgrade of the Ouroboros protocol to increase the throughput. Yeah, I think this should be, it's S or A for me. I think if we get this right, should get our more scalable. But what do you think about it?
It's a tricky one because, as I said, right, more speed without use cases is a bit pointless. I mean, it's good for marketing, obviously. And by the time you have too much users or too many users, it's a bit too late to start thinking about scaling your system. So that means you need to see that coming, and Leios therefore is a top priority. I've got a hard time putting it under S, to be honest, just because I don't think right now this is where we should put all our attention. But it should be it should be quite high.
I was saying there, Seba, sorry.
Yeah, from my side, I think fast finality, which is a paras, is more important than throughput. So keep in mind, these are two separate things. One is how much data can you push through. The other one is how fast can that data be finalized. I think the finality right now is probably more important than the throughput for the usability of Cardano. But I do think Leios conceptually is a good idea, and it does help with some of these these finality ideas, because as you might know, a lot of the transaction prioritization roadmap items are assuming Leios will go through. Some of the potential optimizations on Paris only work if Leios goes through. As you might also know, Leios is a fairly big redesign of the core Cardano or board system, the core consensus. So it's hard to build other things while not being sure what happens with Leios. Therefore, I would probably put it in either S or A, because implementing it gives us better clarity on a lot of the other things that need to be built. I think Paris is more important than this, but it helps unlock a lot of different things and gives us better clarity.
Yeah, I really see Leios as like Cardano version 3, whereas Peras can be more seen as like an overlay, a set of functionality we add on top that provide faster finality, so that clearly has a benefit for application that needs that today. But it doesn't fundamentally change the protocol, and the fact that you can actually implement Peras as a complete overlay is kind of a testimony of that. Like, you don't need to change the core consensus, whereas Leios, like, it's really rethinking the entire beast. So it's also much more complicated to implement, and it's going to be much more disruptive to the ecosystem. And I do think we're at a point where we do want our ecosystem to develop. So it's not the right time now to break the ecosystem, and implementing Leios is kind of going in that direction. Not immediately, because it's going to take time, but I don't quite see how we get to implement Leios without fundamentally changing the way things work. Whereas Peras, that feels like a more low-hanging fruit. We can enable it if we want. If we do it right, that means we can even possibly solve the problem of a data availability layer, because we're going to need that for Peras, transferring all the voting certificates that are needed, which means that Mithril can benefit from that, Midgard can benefit from that, and possibly other solutions. So Peras definitely, to me, could be S tier. And Leios, it's really like, hey, we're going to rewrite this entire thing. So it's like, do we want to do it now, or are there other items more, with higher priority to tackle first, while we work on Leios in the background, in a sense?
I have a question. I was reading the Leios paper, and I could not quantify the, let's say, the metrics improvement. Did you guys have also this thought experiment? How faster would Cardano go in terms of the metric everybody's asking about, TPS? Did you think about that, or what's did you not look at that?
Yes, and it's also an interesting thing that you should not look at Leios necessarily only in its best case scenario, right? Because if you read between the lines, Leios under attack degrades into what we have today, right? Into prowess, which means that the worst performance of Leios is kind of what we have today. And to me, that means, if you always only consider the worst case scenario, well, Leios is not better than what we have today in terms of adversarial resistance. Now on the best days, right? If everything goes fine and no one is attacking the chain, then that means you can possibly run as fast as you could, almost, or as fast as your network bandwidth and CPUs allows. Which means that then we are actually constrained by the hardware requirements we want to set on Cardano. And here, in a sense, the sky is the limit. But we've always been quite conservative with Cardano, saying, we want a node to be runnable on a low-end hardware. But I think Leios gonna open the door to, well, now that we have Leios, that means if you have a 32 core CPU with an immense amount of computing resources, you're gonna get much faster transactions. So everyone's gonna race to increasing their hardware potentially, and that means we might lose some decentralizations because of that, since we're gonna remove people from being able to participate to the consensus because the hardware becomes too expensive. So it's kind of a weird balance. And if we stick with the hardware requirements we have today, yeah, that means you go around like 1000 TPS relatively easily, and we can go beyond. But that means increasing the hardware and increasing the network bandwidth and possibly reducing decentralization because of that.
Yeah, I think in general, Ethereum has a concept called PBS that has some conceptual overlap with Leios. Obviously, they're fairly different, but conceptually there's some overlap. And so I feel like the concept of Leios is kind of an idea whose time has come, and different blockchains are kind of looking at these kinds of concepts as a way to improve their chains. So I think maybe we can agree on as in this is probably something we'll have to do in the future. The question of how much do we want to do it now, given that there's a lot of prioritization work we're doing with lower hanging fruit. But I think generally speaking, we want to get this done anyways, and it is a roadmap item that will take a while to build. It is a non-trivial change, so I think it's better to work on it now in the background as other efforts go on.
So it's A. Are we all happy with A?
Yeah, A or B eventually. I mean, if we have too many items in A, that's one of the first one I would demote to B.
Okay. Fair transaction processing.
Yeah, this depends on Leios mostly.
So this is, can you elaborate on it, Seba? What is fair transaction
so basically, the core thing is that blockchains have limited bandwidth. You can't have infinite number of transactions. And there's some use cases that might depend on being able to have fast transaction processing for the use case to work. So for example, imagine you have a lending protocol. You've loaned your token to somebody as long as the price is not go to below a certain price, like you don't get liquidated, this kind of thing. You might need to add more collateral to your position to avoid getting liquidated. But if the network's under congestion, it might take you a few hours to go through. Like there, obviously, like it shouldn't take a few hours, but like theoretically, on like the absolutely worst case conditions, like it could take a while. And what's made even worse is that oftentimes the kind of situation where transaction processing takes a while is also the cases where the prices move the most. So for these, specific things, people will be like, hey, like I need my transaction to go through right now. Like I will lose a lot of money if it does not go through. There's also, other things like layer 2s that might say like, hey, I want my transaction to go through faster because my transaction does not represent one user, it represents an aggregate history of, multiple hundreds or thousands of users doing different actions. So the way blockchains have tackled this historically is with a fee market, which is the more you pay, the sooner your transaction gets included into the blockchain. There's, of course, some concern of the impacts of this kind of fee market, which is if the chain gets really congested and the fees go up, it might price out regular people that can't afford to spend hundreds of dollars on getting their transaction to go through. So there's a lot of interest in trying to get a more fair system to process transactions so that there's some way for these latency sensitive use cases to go through, but without pricing out the average person. So there's some ideas around tiered fees for this. There's some ideas around Leios and how to architect Leios around the idea of fair transaction processing. I believe Leios gives us the smoothest way to integrate this because of the Leios architecture, where Leios, if you don't know, already kind of splits up the network into different buckets operated by usually different pools. And you can submit the different buckets if you want your transaction to be picked up faster. And so Leios kind of gives us a nicer way to get this kind of fair transaction processing, but it's not required conceptually. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of the topic.
Yeah. So, Matthias, what's you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think this is kind of proposing a solution already to a question that is not unanimous, or how to put it, like that is quite polarizing as a question. Should we have a fee market already? This is kind of giving an answer to it, saying no, we should not, because we can have fair transaction processing instead as a way to share the bandwidth. But I think there is a bigger question than that on top, which is, what about the fee market? Like, what do we do when we reach the chain capabilities? And so I would see maybe more research on that area, saying what are the possible options actually? How can you implement different fee markets if you have to, or if you do, if you don't want to implement a fee market, what are your options? So that then we can have a variety of solutions to pick from, and decide which one we want to implement. So
yeah, I agree with that. I feel like conceptually we need this. It'll help a lot if we have a way to decide on this prioritization, especially when it comes to layer 2s. But I don't think there's clarity on the best way to do it. I think most likely the way this will play out is people will do some core research work on different ideas and then propose some governance info actions, and then the DREPs will vote on different potential ideas. And then based off these results, we would pick one to fund and implement. So I support this proposal in this kind of like sense of not implementing it, but rather doing a systemization of knowledge and trying to propose the different options, and then doing the governance proposals to get DREPs to pick an approach, and then afterwards, actually fund the implementation.
Would you agree on a C tier, or you would put it higher?
C or D for me.
Yeah, C or D as well.
Then D. Let's do D. Yeah, we need to speed things up a bit. If not, Seba goes to bed in the morning. An interesting one, Minotaur.
Is it already solved?
Yeah.
Or is it about implementing Minotaur?
This is foundational research.
Yeah, but the paper has been published on that already.
Yeah, and I think this is something. For people who don't know, Minotaur is about multi-consensus systems, which is notably something that some partner chains are interested in. As I say, imagine you want to build a partner chain that uses proof of work. That's not really easily doable because your chain might get 51% attacked really easily, because proof of work blockchains are fairly vulnerable when they just get started. So you want to leverage security from Cardano. So you want to have proof of work plus inherit security from Cardano instead of just relying on Cardano specifically. So obviously Midnight is one of those chains that's interested in Minotaur. There might be others that come up. I think it is kind of an interesting problem. I'm not sure how much Cardano needs to be the one putting out the money for this. Although it does enable new use cases on Cardano, I think historically, if you look at layer 2s on Ethereum, most people are okay with just saying, oh, I don't want to introduce my own resource and consensus. I want to just fully leverage Ethereum's consensus. So if a lot of projects are okay with that, do we really want to invest the massive amount of time from the Cardano budget into enabling this? So
I think
in my opinion, here. Yeah, I think it's probably the
it's already a sole research problem, in the sense that we've published a paper on that explains how it should work. So now the next step is to implement it, and I would love to see an implementation of that, really. But it won't happen on Cardano. That's necessarily going to be on a layer 2 or a sidechain or a partner chain, whatever you want to call it. So should that be super high on our priority list? Probably not. But is this an interesting thing to showcase? Most likely, yes. Also because that's a concept we can then reuse for multiple layer 2s. So yeah.
So we agree on a low impact D tier or not recommended?
I wouldn't go as low.
Well, you can say, and we do an average, and
I mean,
where would you put it,
it's an interesting item, but as Sebastian said, I don't think this is like pertaining to Cardano, so to speak. Right? It's about other.
Yeah, but this is the Cardano budget, right? I think.
Yeah. So
I mean,
in that
we
sense,
can have also protein folding is a very good research topic, but we would.
Yeah, exactly. I would say off topic. Then from a purely Cardano perspective, it's completely off topic.
Yeah, let's agree.
It's an interesting
very
one. So
yeah. Shall we say not recommended? Very cool, but maybe not Cardano, or we can leave it in the question mark tier if we don't wanna.
Okay, can we have a tier like if there is any money left?
I mean, that's low impact. Let's put low impact or second.
Yeah.
But what do you say? Are you fine with D or F?
Yeah, I think I'm fine with D.
Okay. All right.
Proof of useful work is even more so. So proof of useful work is a specific thing you might want to combine with Minotaur.
Yeah, so that would definitely be below Minotaur.
Yeah, so I would probably put it in F. Because I don't know a single project that's actually building with this at the moment. Just by the fact the research paper came out a few years ago, and it depends on Minotaur, which is not in production yet. So it could be revisited in a future budget next year. I think putting the budget for this year is maybe overly optimistic.
I like it. We are coming with a good balance distribution. Congestion control.
Yeah, I think this is really related to the fair transaction processing, so maybe just bundled together.
Yeah, although I would say it's slightly more interesting. I mean, it's like we've always been using transaction fees, and you often hear about like blockchain that are like, hey, we are a feeless blockchain. And then when you start digging a bit, but how do you ensure that your system doesn't get spammed? Usually there is no solutions behind, or at least I haven't seen any system that is feeless and that can also guarantee security and operationality of the system. So that is an interesting research area, but definitely not a top priority. So C or D to me, maybe more C.
Can you live with C, Seba?
Yeah, I agree. It's a bit more general than fair transaction processing. There's other ways to tackle the problems. I agree.
Yeah, they could be merged in one and be kind of C tier. Yeah, I agree with you. Tokenomics design is very vague. Is it? It's probably again we could bucket it with the congestion control, and it's a bit more.
No, I mean there's a lot of discussion around tokenomic design related to what should the parameters be for stake pools, how much should stake pools earn, all these kinds of things. I think it's a debate that's been going on for years with no clear consensus on a specific path, and I think it's focusing on trying to split up the pie we already have as opposed to growing the pie, which I think is just not the right thing to be thinking about.
What difference do you make with the next item, actually, the reward sharing and transaction fees?
I think they're pretty related. I think a lot of people, the tokenomics design is not just this, because it also involves, I think, like how much of the treasury tax be, these other kinds of things. How should the inflation be set? So I think it's a bit more general, but I do think they're very, very closely related.
It's about the parameters, the protocol parameters. CF did some research about A0 and K.
Mm-hmm.
I do see some value in it, but I don't. It's not for sure. It's not the top priority, right?
But I think
high actually, because I mean the rewards are getting worse and worse every year, right? Every 4 years or so we get less rewards, and we are not seeing the uptick in transaction fees at the moment that will counterbalance that. which means that effectively, the chain is less and less attractive for people. And that means it's becoming a pressing problem, actually, to find better incentives and better ways of sharing rewards. So arguably, I would put that quite high on the list.
Yeah, I think I agree in the sense, like what it says. I think we should be focusing on trying to increase the pie. That comes in concepts like these Babel fees, in concepts like Leios or Paris or Mithril that add more features to the Cardano stake pools. It comes in partner chains that might, give extra rewards to stake pools. There's a lot of different budget items that are meant to bring in new revenue to Cardano, new services that Cardano as a blockchain can offer. And I want to focus on building those out and making them do well, as opposed to trying to do any kind of rethinking of how we split up the current pie. Maybe to put it in a different way, if you look at some of the blockchains out there that have become profitable, Bitcoin became profitable through NFTs, Ethereum became profitable for DeFi, and then later on NFTs, and then later on through layer 2s, and then Solana at some point was profitable through meme coin. All that to say is that for these existing blockchains, oftentimes they reach profitability through just one thing that really pops off. And that ends up bringing a lot more revenue than trying to think about optimizing the revenue they already get. So if the tokenomic design item is about how can we best architect Babel fees, for example, to bring in more use cases, like, one thing for Babel fees, like, can we enable payment of transaction fees in Bitcoin to onboard the Bitcoin users onto Cardano? These kinds of things. And then if the tokenomics design is like, how can we make sure these use cases succeed and bring the most value to the Cardano blockchain, then I definitely agree. If the tokenomics design is going to be like, well, based off my report, the treasury fee should be 19% instead of 20% or something like that, then I think it's just not worth the time.
Yeah. I mean, without adoption, you can have the best tokenomics design. It's not going to work, right? We need adoption is king, and then.
Yeah, but given also the circumstances, right? Where governance, we're entering this era where we want to spend money that is in the treasury now, which means that all these topics becomes more and more relevant. So yeah, for me, that's at least a B tier, but also with the disclaimer that Seba just said, right? If it's actually about thinking of how do we make this increase the pie, and not just rethinking what out of parameters we currently have. I mean, ever since we created the CIPs, right? Every now and then there is a CIP about changing completely the reward scheme of Cardano. Like every 6 months there is a new CIP about that. So there is a need and a desire in the ecosystem, I think, to review a bit some of the incentives we've originally designed for Cardano. And so that makes it an important item.
Are you fine, Seba, with B? I think we...
Yeah, just with that caveat, then yes, I'm okay with that.
Decentralized identity and reputation management. Well, this is a long description, but
yeah, I think this is the kind of thing that people have spent a lot of money on. So, for example, like IOG has spent multiple years of effort trying to do decentralized identity. I think it is something that a lot of projects are super interested in for a variety of reasons. It's a bit hard to do without ZK. And so I think at the end of the day, a lot of the identity solutions are nowadays revolving around ZK identity, ZK passport, these kinds of things. I would not say it's all just on ZK side, but I think it's like a lot of the DID stuff is around that. But I think, as I mentioned previously in this video, there's a lot of interest in like real world assets in general. So I would conceptually put it like A or potentially higher. The only caveat is I think like a lot of things we would need to get these decentralized identity stuff working properly requires like the ZK tech like Starstream to be built beforehand. Because if you want to do, for example, like, okay, I can prove that I am in the EU without proving which country I'm in, these kinds of things, like a lot of these require.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I agree, but I think we get into a layer of an application layer that is a bit different from every other item. For instance, I would argue that DeFi is very important, right? But it's absent from the roadmap because it's a more of a application layer type of item, right? And I think for decentralized identity and reputation management, I see this item as very important. However, it does not fall into the layer 1 Cardano roadmap.
But that's kind
necessarily.
of the problem to me. It should, I think.
It should. You think it should?
Yeah. So I
Yes,
would put
I
it in
agree.
S, actually. So for two reasons mainly. It's a use case enabler, right? So it gets A tier at minimum, just for that. And in terms of building products with that, I don't think we need to invest that much effort into research there, because there has already been tons of research on those topics. So it's about time we kind of start shipping solutions on the decentralized identity layer. And the second is what you just said, right? It looks like it's something which just lives at the applicative layer, but actually we feel we need it at the layer 1 as well, as part of the governance, for example. If we want to implement effective stuff like quadratic voting, we're going to need some kind of identity layer. For many layer 2's application, it's also useful to have an identity layer. And I think there is a lot we can do without ZK as well. Like ZK is definitely an area where this could help. But, if you just consider what also exists ahead of ZK, I think there is a lot we can already deliver and a lot of groundwork that can be done, and that could enable some use cases. So
yeah, I agree. I think in my set it's at least A. I think the stuff that would make it S is stuff that's being built in parallel. But I think we can put it at least A, and I'd be open to S as well.
All right. So guys, I think we need to speed up. I get some angry messages from people to speed up. So I don't want to do a part 2. Let's do a part 2 about another topic.
I mean, were we supposed to complete that in an hour?
80 minutes. We have 80 minutes. I think. I have time. So, but let's.
Yeah,
let's
I think we have 25 minutes left. So I think we should be good.
Yeah, let's speed things up. I would suggest let's go cold the turkey, like we say what tier it is, and then we fight it over, and then if we have consensus, we can. Next level governance protocol. Now we can discuss 1 hour about this research. Well, it is important.
What does that even mean?
Yeah, I feel like this is a bit vague. You'll have to go through DREP voting to see if people are interested in these ideas first.
Can we sort V1 governance first already? Because I'm not sure we have completely sorted governance yet.
Shall we agree on a tepid C tier for this one?
I mean, depends really what it includes, because the title is a bit clickbaiting.
Yeah, that's true. Low impact is not a high priority. Seba, what do you think? Can we live with D or C?
I put D. I think there's a lot of people worked in place before going in budget. Right.
So we put governance incentive together. Do we agree?
I
think this is paying DREP, in which case I would put F.
Yeah, I would also put F on that, mainly because I don't think it's an answered question yet. I mean, there are still people disagreeing that this should even be the case that we do it, and it's something we can fully do at the applicative layer. So I don't see why we should work on having first-class support in the protocol for that yet. If you want it, do it with smart contracts. We have very capable smart contract. They can do that. So
okay, if it is, move on.
Nice. If you feel we need to discuss things, let's do it. Right? I have time until light client infrastructure. Oh, that's a good one. Foundational research.
Yeah, so I could be convinced of either S or F on this. The reason why is because when people refer to light client infrastructure, there's usually 2 different things they're thinking of. One is how can we connect your blockchain to another? So for example, how can we have the Cardano light client implemented in Ethereum smart contract or in a Midnight smart contract or Substrate? like ink contract, which is like really useful for these kinds of bridging solutions and bringing more users into Cardano, which I think is really important. But there's another case of like light client infrastructure, which is how do we make light wallets more secure? So as far as like when it comes to connecting Cardano to other blockchains, I think that's super important. And having like a really good secure solution for this. So I probably put that into S tier, especially if we want to do like this Bitcoin DeFi. We basically need this.
Hey, folks. I am not sure if I've interrupted the stream. Let me get this back up here. Give me just a moment.
Something we already have that's there. It just demands to be used. So it just needs a bit more love. So yeah.
Shall we do?
Okay, so I say Mithril S, like client infrastructure F.
Yeah, I would be okay with that.
Yeah, it looks good. I'm convinced. Yeah. Consensus innovation. What the hell is this?
You mean beyond Leios?
Teras and so I guess this.
So yeah, reading a lot of this, I think it's probably again duplicative. It talks about like some BFT stuff, which is a bit what Paris is trying to bring. But I think basically this item is meant to kind of cover a bit of the Paris work, a bit of the Minotaur work, a bit of other work. So there's some like roadmap items that are meant to be these kind of like more general directional things, which
It sounds to me it's really like about new research, like finding new consensus protocols and new algorithms. So like it's really pure research in the consensus space. And as much as I find that interesting, I'm also like same as for the what we said before, like proof of use for work. Should Cardano be funding this kind of thing directly? Not sure. If we're committed to Leios already as our new next upgrade, there will be no time to implement another consensus protocol anyway, unless we find something which is even better than Leios on every metrics. But good luck kind of proving that.
Shall we do low impact or D or F? So
I would put F.
Matthias, you're the tiebreaker. F.
Yeah, the related one is fast BFT, which is related to consensus innovation, which is basically if you build a partner chain or a layer 2, you might want to have mostly partner chain. You might want to have some BFT consensus on it for it to be faster. Notably, Midnight and Quantum Husky are, I think, looking into these kinds of fast BFT research items, and there's some research cooperation with some other entities on this. Although I think it's really important, I don't think this is as much of a Cardano item.
It's more also of like a solved problem, really. Like you just pick Mysticeti, right? It's like a consensus from Sui, and you have fast BFT. It's like there is no. I mean, yes, there is always research that can be done on these areas, but it's really not high on the priority list to me.
F.
Agreed. Yep.
I like that the community tier list, there were only A's, and now we have like the majority of the things in the F. Tonight, don't go out.
I mean, I think we're also much more pragmatic in the sense that we'll have to build some of the stuff. So I'm not gonna build things that I don't believe in, So.
Anti-grinding.
That's a cool one, actually.
Yeah, I conceptually, so basically trying to make the network a bit more secure by avoiding potential attack. I understand that there's some theoretical stuff that people have talked about in the past. I don't think there's super likely or top priority, especially if you think about the work we have to do for Paris and Leios. I would prefer not to spend time on something that I feel is not practically something that's really an issue.
Yeah, so I mean, if we have Peras, in a sense, the grinding is already diminished. Like the what you can do by grinding, right? So the impact of those attacks is highly diminished, and definitely I would put more effort into Peras than into that. But I would still kind of like to see a paper maybe explaining, what changes you would have to do to the existing protocol to make it more grinding secure, and lower down also the settlement in that sense, because that might be actually way easier than implementing the full Peras. So if that is a kind of close reach, low hanging fruit, I would definitely put some effort into that. If you tell me that's going to be a 5 or 10 years research effort, like, no.
Yeah, and I think we kind of skipped talking about Paris too much because it was kind of bucketed into our discussion about Leios. I think Paris is a really good idea. It basically makes the finality for Cardano much faster. I think the current target finality mentioned in a lot of the docs for Paris is still too slow. I think we should aim for at most, finality in a few blocks, if not like 1 or 2 blocks. And I think we can get there. It's just that the current research work takes one approach to get us to a certain point, and then we can bootstrap some other protocols on top of it to get us in faster. And I think, like Matthias said, if we solve those problems in Paris and make Paris even better, it gives us a lot of this anti-grinding for free. Because one of the reasons Paris is not as fast as it could be is precisely because of some potential like grinding attacks against it. Maybe not grinding attacks, but things related to grinding attack. So I think a lot of this is actually should be bundled under Paris as opposed to a separate roadmap item.
Yeah.
So what do we do with it? We put secondary consideration C, or we put it in not recommended because it's under Paris?
No, I think C is good, but I would still put a disclaimer like, provided that this is not already tackled as part of Paris.
Okay.
Or maybe you can do both in parallel, but like anti-grinding by itself is interesting, but it's kind of, to me, I just see as is it a subset of Paris. It's a way to subdivide the work on Paris.
I see we have a duplicate. Snarks.
Oh, recursive
Yeah,
snark.
so recursive snarks are a technique used by Midnight. Basically what it allows you to do is combine proofs together. So if you have a proof from A to B and a proof from B to C, you can combine them together to a single proof from A to C. Conceptually, it's really interesting technology. There's other blockchains that have this implemented in production, like Mina. The problem is that conceptually, this is not the state of the art, so to speak. There's some other ideas around Boolean schemes that tend to give you some better performance that like inherit some ideas from recursive snarks. And the recursive snark prioritization already exists under Midnight. So Midnight's already doing recursive snarks. So I feel like this is conceptually something we should spend time on. I think the name is maybe not the right one. That's to say, I think we should be able to get ZK directly on the Cardano layer 1. I think the way to get there while maintaining the low node requirements we want is probably folding schemes as opposed to recursive snarks. And that's kind of what we're doing for Starstream or ZKVM that we're working on. And so I would leave the recursive snark stuff to Midnight, which is already pretty far in the productization of this technology. And my understanding is meant to ship later this year. So as opposed to recursive snark specifically, more generally the idea of allowing ZK proofs to settle to Cardano in a way that is efficient, I would put it at A, but it depends what they plan to spend the money on. I think this could easily end up being spent on the wrong thing.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a top priority. I would possibly just put it under B. For the reasons you just mentioned, right? It's an important thing. It's an interesting research area. I don't think Midnight also is the only one researching this kind of thing. Pretty much every single ZK platform today is interested in solving that problem. So I'm surprised even that there isn't some kind of consortium about finding solving the recursive snark problem and having multiple actors being part of that. If there is such a thing, we should be part of it as Cardano. I mean, in the sense that we should have people and industries working towards that, so that we're not just left behind as an ecosystem. So it's definitely important.
Yeah, and
it's going to be a use case enabler, but
yeah, there's like some of that. So like the recursive snark for Midnight is not entirely from scratch. Rather, it's part of the Halo 2 family of DCK protocols, along with a few other blockchain. The stuff we're building for Starstream is part of the Nova family, which is some work done by some other companies like Aztec and Microsoft and a few other entities out there. So for all the ZK stuff, I think usually people don't usually go at it alone, and rather a part of these like families. They're not foundations or like associations per se, but like groups of many different blockchains banding resources together to work on these.
So what I would put in S is something we don't have actually on the roadmap here, which is just snarks. Having more support for snarks in Cardano, and recursive snarks becomes an important initiative, but not a top priority or an immediate imperative to me.
Yeah, I wanted to discuss 5 minutes at the end what's missing. So that's a good point. So we have snarks. I put it in B, so because I agree with.
So technically, we have some of the building blocks to do that, but the fact is that we've got them for almost a year now, and there is still no actual solution that has emerged that is usable today on Cardano with that, which kind of indicates that either they are missing better support or there is just not enough money to fuel all the efforts there. So
proof of restake. I think this goes in the direction of eigenlayer or
so it's basically I see this as kind of an extension of Mithril. So Mithril gives you a way to build overlay networks on Cardano. Restaking is a similar kind of overlay network, except instead your funds are usually at risk if you do some behavior incorrectly. So it's like conceptually what Mithril gives you plus some extra conditions. I think if you look at Eigenlayer, which is a network that does this, it is at a market cap of a few billion, if I remember correctly. So it's something I think a lot of people have a lot of interest in. I would say there's no big use case on Eigenlayer that's production ready today, but there's quite a few companies building on top of it. So I think it makes sense as a way to extend Cardano to allow more different kinds of use cases to be built on it. So I'll put it at least A. I think although there is work we can do with just Mithril as it is to enable some really cool stuff, I think this concept of restaking actively validated services could enable a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. I would put it at least in A. Matthias?
I would put it after Mithril enhancement, for sure. Because I think we can do a lot with what we have today on Mithril, and I would rather develop Mithril than thinking about the potential use cases. But again, that's also a use case enabler, so it gets at least A for me. And yeah, I mean, I'm fine with A.
Midgard, optimistic rollups.
Yeah. So a lot of, I think everyone knows also about Midgard now in the ecosystem. It's made quite a lot of noise. It's a very promising one. I'm not sure if they have released the paper or not yet. I mean, I've seen some draft of it. I think it was at some point released publicly, right?
Yes, it is on their GitHub.
So okay, there is a lot of good ideas in that. From what I've been also hearing from the Anastasia Labs team is they're building that in a way that makes it possible for people to kind of contribute and be part of the development. So I'm really eager to see that being open sourced. I think it is also a very good use case enabler. So it goes next to Hydra in that sense. I would put an S on A on that. I really want to see Midgard out, and I don't want to have another L2 project that just fans out and disappear from Cardano.
Yeah, I think from my side, I think this optimistic rollup stuff will definitely have a faster performance compared to like the recursive snark work for at least the next like 2 years. And so I would say it depends how fast they think they can get Midgard released. The reason I say this is because you think about it, for example, Optimism, which is an optimistic rollup for Ethereum, came out I think like 2019, 2020 is like when they released their testnet. And to this day, they still don't have the full fraud proofs enabled, if I remember correctly. So it turns out it's a lot harder to build than they thought. And Midgard is also a bit tricky because they need to generate fraud proofs of the ledger rules, which I think is a bit hard to get right and will require a lot of domain experts to look into it. And so I think the biggest question is how fast do they think they'll be able to get it to market? So for me, it's between an A and a B, depending on speed to market.
So we have consensus on A. It's also interesting to see which layer 2 people are gonna pick for the different use cases. Like they're gonna do a partner chain, Midgard, they're gonna do Hydra. It's yeah. So are we good with A, or Matthias, you wanna fight for it?
No, I'm not planning for S. Although could be.
We cannot have too many S's, right?
Yeah, exactly. If there was maybe a more precise item of like a subset of Midgard that is maybe restricting some of the transactions to make sure that the fraud proof is doable and so on, like okay, S. I'm fine with an A otherwise. I would just like that to see Midgard live as soon as possible.
For the revised stake pool incentives, I think we can bunch it
right?
together here, right?
Yeah, that's doing with the reward sharing and transaction fees.
Yeah.
Nested transactions.
Yeah, this is a one that I'm not sure of. So basically, if you're not familiar with this, so basically, one of the issues that's a bit hard to tackle in Cardano is transaction chaining. When you have a few different actions you want to chain together, it can be a bit tricky. It requires you to make multiple separate transactions. And then these are hard for explorers to deal with, a bit tricky for wallets to deal with, a bit tricky for dApps to deal with. And so one of the solutions that has come up a few times is, well, what if we allow transactions of transactions? So transaction inside contains multiple other transactions. It says, oh, please run all these transactions atomically. It does solve the issue. Other people have tried this. So for example, there's another UTXO-based blockchain called Fuel that has this functionality. It just does not feel like, it feels a bit hacky. It's like, oh, we'll just have transactions of transactions, and then like it's something. But I feel like we should probably give more thought about why are we trying to do nested transactions? Is there a better way to solve this? I mean, in Starstream, which is the ZKBM, we tried to tackle this instead by allowing you to iterate UTXOs multiple times within the same transaction. So instead of duplicating the entire transaction content, you're just allowed to chain UTXOs multiple times, which gives you the same equivalent functionality. So it's solved this way, but I think that would be much harder to implement in Plutus, which obviously is what a lot of the existing infrastructure is built to deal with. So although it is a bit hacky, I think it is the easiest way to enable this in the protocol as is, and would make implementing some dApps and simplify, like make some of these dApps a bit easier and simplify some of the behavior of some of these wallets and explorers. So I could be convinced either way on this issue.
Matthias, what's your take on it?
I'm not fully convinced because I think that's a problem we can already solve at the smart contract level. Not necessarily in an optimal fashion, but if you look at solutions like Bullet, you can have intent-based contract that will give you some of the same capabilities. So therefore, this is not an immediate problem we have to solve at the layer 1 level. And I would be much more seduced by solutions like Starstream that Sebastian is describing, where we know the limited continuations and possibly just rethinking the way we execute smart contract entirely, rather than complexifying the transaction execution as a whole, right? So it's like, hey, you want this particular kind of thing that the nested transaction give you, like you want this intent-based divisions of your smart contracts. Well, use this type of script and this type of VM, and we have a ledger already that supports multiple languages, to support multiple VMs. People don't realize that, but technically what we have in Cardano today with Plutus V1, V2, and V3 are 3 distinct VMs. So adding a 4th VM that would have a different semantic would not be that much more complicated. And so I would rather go on that path than what's being proposed currently with nested transaction. So maybe C or D for me.
Seba, C or D? What do you think?
I would default to D. I could be convinced of C if somebody made a really passionate argument, but my default intuition is D.
LSM. So I think this just make the
that's
use less memory, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I could be convinced also, I guess, for C. For S or F equally. I would argue for S in the sense that this is work that's been in the making for the past 3 or 4 years already. It should already be implemented. It should already be live. It's also not solving a problem that is that we should have been solving. I'm a bit biased here because obviously working on Amaru, and we've opted for a drastically different approach there, which is to pick up something from the industry that already implement log structure mesh trees. There are plenty of databases that do just that. So having to redesign an entire database in Haskell to do that particular thing, I think to me was an overkill. So it should be delivered. And in that sense, it should be an immediate imperative now. There is no way this item should be dragging again. And at the same time, as I just said, to me, it's also not recommended because there are already plenty of databases in the industry to pick from that implement that solution just fine. So, but yeah, there's been already too much effort on that to just drop it now. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree that conceptually we need this. If this is the right way to implement it, I'm not convinced. So maybe we can put it in the middle, C, which is we need this, so it's S, but also implementation-wise, who knows? So F, so let's put in the middle.
Yeah, hopefully people will look at the context and the discussion, right, and not just say C tier. It's
no, that will never happen. That's the internet. People will just look at the results and draw conclusions.
Governance improvements. I think also we can put it merge it with something else, right?
Yeah, that's the.
Yeah, I think this is more important than next level governance protocols, improving current governance. So I put it D.
So yeah, it's
okay.
See,
You're
it's
right.
We need that eventually, but it's also let's get to what we have currently working first.
Yeah,
maybe.
Timeliness market.
I'm not sure. Is that related to
work would create a POC of a small change to the Cardano nodes that would permit block producing node to ensure, even under extreme Cardano loads, the insertion of a transaction into the block about to be produced.
Yeah, I feel like this is duplicate.
I mean, that is literally the liveness property that every consensus protocol should have.
Yeah.
So the fact that that is on the roadmap would indicate that our consensus is broken, which I don't think it is. So.
Question mark
shall
here?
we?
Yeah. What is that? Question mark.
We leave it here then. Partner chains. This is
Isn't it like a duplicate of another one?
which
I've
one?
got a sense we've already discussed that, right? The whole Midnight partner chain, Minotaur.
Yeah, so I assume this is more related to the specific partner chain SDK,
Yeah.
which is the substrate SDK that
Correct.
they are building for people to easily launch their own partner chains. To be honest, I haven't looked into the specific partner chain SDK that much in detail. I've only seen like presentations on it. So I don't
think
know
it's
the end results.
I think it's more general purpose than, because here they say EVM-based applications. So I think the framework is more for a eigenlayer type of framework. It goes in that direction, and I think this is the Midnight first partner chain, and then this partner chains is probably the connector to this kind of.
Yeah, but I think Midnight is not using the partner chain SDK because I think it predates it.
Yeah, I mean, there is a part of me that thinks this is a use case enabler, so it should go quite high on the list. It's about interoperability between chains, but it also feels like this is not sort of protocol specific, so it has nothing to do on a core roadmap. But yeah, I could agree with an A. Or
Seba?
Yeah, I would maybe put it at B. I need to look more into specifically the partner chain SDK that they've been building and the progress on that and what blockers they've run into, to know if that specific implementation is worth pursuing or if we should rethink things. I think conceptually, I agree it's a use case enabler that I think makes sense. When it comes to specific this implementation that's being worked on, not sure. So I'd be okay with A or B.
You can go with B then, I think. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with B.
You've convinced me of B as well.
ZK fold symbolic.
Oh yeah, that's the Haskell new language for creating smart contract language that are like zero knowledge capable. That ZK fold's been working on. I find it interesting that after everything that happens around P2CX, they still decided to make a Haskell SDK. I thought we had kind of already a sense that people don't want to write Haskell, generally speaking. I mean, I love to, but I'm not a good sample of the developer, out there. That's why, we had Aiken and, other stuff coming in. So yeah, I have some reserves on that particular one, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think they have a lot of right ideas. I just think the surface language they have for people to implement stuff, if you look at their docs, it's I feel like this is not super approachable to the average developer. For the same reason, Plutus TX is not super approachable. So
yeah,
I have some trouble.
I remember discussing with ZK Folds like years ago this particular thing, and my stance at the time has still not changed. I think this would have been better introduced as an annotation system on existing languages to produce better UPLC that could then lead to zero knowledge proofs rather than a whole new language. So I think it's also not too late to pivot in that sense, and enhance Aiken and Plutarch and other solutions to have annotations that would make the generation of the proofs easier for them. But I really think that the layer at which this whole stack operates right now is too high. It should rather target the UPLC, which is the common vocabulary for every smart contract we have today. Than trying to define a whole new language.
In my opinion, there's kind of like 3 different ways you can introduce ZK to Cardano. One is as like a totally independent system that posts ZK proofs to Cardano occasionally, which is similar to like the way a lot of layer 2s work on Ethereum. It's the same way like Midnight will connect to Cardano. The second one is you say, okay, well, let's try and make ZK VM run directly on Cardano, and that's what Starscream is building. And then there's kind of intermediates in between, which is okay. Let's try and get like a ZK execution of Plutus itself, which I think has like a lot of different trade-offs. And I know this is something they've looked into. And I think as Tia said, I think this would probably been like more clear of a win or like it's something worth spending time on, as opposed to this like Haskell system they've built.
So should it be a secondary consideration or low impact, or?
Yeah, I mean,
low
it's been hard because, you know, obviously this is something by another company who is a startup who could pivot based off feedback, and they're not here in this call to talk about their project. So I'd probably leave it as question mark.
I would probably go for low impact, but with a disclaimer again saying, I don't think the idea itself is bad. I just think that the current interface to it, which is a whole new language, as a Haskell DSL, is not the right approach. But it's also not too late to pivot to something that could be more useful.
Yeah, agreed.
And if it was pivoted in that sense, I would definitely rank it a lot higher because that's a very good use case enabler.
Yep.
Ledger app rewrite.
I beg your pardon. What is that about? A new UI.
Oh, I think this is like the actual hardware wallet.
Yeah, okay, the hardware wallet Ledger app. I see. Well, I guess to include everything around governance, possibly, as it's a bit lacking at the moment.
I mean, to me, this is very important. However, then if we rank this high, there's other items not in the roadmap that are of a similar importance, like why Ledger and
I feel like
Treasure or.
I would put this in F, not because I think this is a bad idea, but I feel like this is more of like a catalyst scope.
Yeah, I would agree.
Project as opposed to a large roadmap item.
Yeah. I would love to see something more generic, like better hardware support. But it's too specific in that sense here to be on the core roadmap. So yeah.
Alternative nodes. So there's an Amaru item. So
so I'm slightly biased, but I go for S, obviously. But I can argue. I think it's actually building alternative nodes in a sense is what makes it possible to argue on such a roadmap. For example, having a single implementation means we have no points of comparisons. Means there is no way we can even experiment with different solutions to assess which one is the best. And it's also by that means that we get to specify all the missing gaps and identify the different problems that the current implementation might have. And even just makes it possible to implement completely new stuff, because the current implementation also has to deal with all the legacy, right? It has to go with the Byron era and all the 4 or 5 years of development that's been into it, which means you have way less freedom into exploring possibly a completely new VM design, where having alternative nodes means you can be a lot more agile on that. And as soon as you've experimented enough with the design, you can start thinking how you also integrate that with your reference implementation in a sense. So
yeah,
that is
say,
definitely high.
Yeah, I'd say from my side, it's probably also S, because although our company is not contributing to a full node, we depend on this project for some of the apps to develop, like Pima, stuff like the chain abstraction framework we were building. Pima engine uses these. Starstream, the ZK we're developing, also will depend on these for the initial launch. I wouldn't be surprised if other things like Mayguard end up launching with these initially. I think for a lot of the Mithril stuff we talked about, would probably, or like Restake would probably end up launching on these first as well. It wouldn't surprise me if even Leios was implemented on these alternative nodes sooner than the Haskell node. So I think in general, it ends up being a pretty large force multiplier in the ecosystem by allowing people to prototype stuff and get stuff to market much faster.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would put it in S tier. The criticism it could get is that it slows things down if we need to implement everything twice, like consensus-wise. But I
mean, that would be true if that was the same team, right?
Yeah, in fact, I mean, I put it in S tier because I don't believe it's gonna make things much slower. If things are done properly.
Yeah,
And the,
I
the benefits
feel
we
like
get out of it overweight the slowness or the coordination efforts needed.
yeah, I think although there are cases where it could make some stuff slower, it's also forcing the Haskell team to specify a lot of things. Like recently, they're trying to write specifications for a lot of the ledger states and the networking stuff that they haven't done until now because they didn't really have a reason to do it. Now this alternative node is forcing them to properly have specs for these parts of Cardano, which is good in general.
Not
It
only
helps
the
as a
Haskell
force
team,
multiplier for a lot of.
I mean, it's not something that falls entirely onto them, right?
Yeah.
Being multiple implementations means that you can also start specifying a particular chunk while the others are working on something else. And
Yeah.
the collaboration and coordination that's needed, it's not a bug, it's a feature here, right? We have more coordinations because that means, we lead to higher quality designs and higher quality specification from the get-go, instead of having to go, to multiple rounds of test nets to realize that the design you've decided on was actually flawed.
Yeah. So I think there are some cases where maybe it'll make the node improvements a bit slower, but I think the impact of force multiplier on building apps and use case to Cardano is worth it, because as was mentioned multiple times throughout this call, what we really care about now is enabling new use cases and apps to be built. And so if this alternative node allows us to do this much faster and better, then it's worth it, even if it brings the productivity hit to the core node, which I'm not too convinced that would happen. But I think it's definitely worth it.
And shout out to Dingo as well. I see in the chat as also.
Indeed. And
yeah,
all of them, literally.
Yeah, so there's Dolos, Amaru, TX Pipe, and I think there's somebody else building some stuff in TypeScript as well.
In TypeScript and in Scala as well, it has started in C++ as well. Daedalus Turbo is turning into a full C++ full node, which I'm very happy to see. So yeah, 2025, 2026 might be the year where we get not only one alternative node, but multiples.
Yeah, and I mean, we see this in Ethereum. Ethereum has multiple nodes. A lot of them specify being specific for different use cases. Hard Hat is very, very well optimized for local developer environments. Foundry is really well optimized for launching layer 2s. There's another one that's Etherix. I think it's really optimized for ZK rollup. There's a lot of these different nodes that are optimized for different use cases. I think this has fairly strongly benefit their ecosystem. I can't imagine doing anything like Ethereum if it was just Geth. Although Geth is really, really popular implementation and it works pretty well. There's a lot of things where actually these other nodes are more optimized for them, and so that's why I can imagine the same thing happening to Cardano. I think it's been a net plus for them, so it should be a net plus for us as well.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys. I think we are done. I would suggest the following. We could schedule a part 2 roadmap where we pick up the things that we did not discuss, but should be maybe added, and maybe a bit more look forward, 5-10 years, quantum research and data availability. We have account abstraction. I would like to also get a bit more info on the ZK VM that you guys at DC Spark are working on. So yeah, thank you so much. I learned a lot, and I hope this was helpful.
That was fun.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. I mean, for someone from a non-technical background, I thought it was very interesting, and I'm sure it was even more interesting to those with the technical background. Giorgio, could you go ahead and screenshot this so we can save this?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Of course. Let's refresh the page.
Well, we have the YouTube video for record, right?
Oh, good point. Right. Good point.
Nice. I have the screenshot. Yeah, I will tweet it.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you, guys. Say bye. Have a good night. And yeah, I also have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Seba. Thank you, Mike.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Alrighty, folks, that brings us to the end there for today's stream, breaking down some of the core priorities there for the Cardano Foundation and just where they see Cardano going moving forward.
Right versus green bananas. Unlock the truth.
There we go. Need to just close out some of these tabs here, but yeah, very interesting to see. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. It did go a little bit longer than I anticipated, so I'm not going to harp too much here, but as you guys clearly saw there for yourselves, a lot of focus in terms of scalability. And I even put up a poll there while we were streaming in real time. And that also seemed to be where the community wants to see the focus on, is improving scaling. And that should be sort of the immediate priority. I'm going to sort of digest this obviously throughout the rest of the day here, and then try to recap and get some content out there. But let me know what you guys think down below as a part of the live conversation here. You know, the immediate focus on Ouroboros pairs, Mytho enhancements, and alternative nodes, just to allow for stake pool operators to be able to contribute to the sharing ecosystem or the sharing economy here within Cardano. A lot of things to expect moving forward. But again, for the sake of time, I won't harp too much here. I'm just looking at Cardano price, not too much going on, but I did mention here that I do believe, and I'm a strong believer, that Bitcoin will be pumping here very soon. So I'm keeping an eye out on that. It seems to be just sort of teeter-tottering there at a very key level, which is around $87,000 per Bitcoin. And as I get ready to close out here, I do want to actually just share something which I think is extremely important. And I'll probably dive a little bit deeper into this in a separate video. So let me actually bring this down. And I'm just going to briefly share as I get ready to let you guys all go here in just a minute. So I'm going to reshare my screen here. And we've got Cardano price. Triple. I appreciate you tuning in. That means a lot. Let me make sure my battery is going. Oh, wow. Okay. Looks like my computer might actually be shutting down here in just a moment. So I may have to touch on this as a part of a separate video. But essentially what I wanted to break down is the fact that Bitcoin right now, if we take a look at the 4-hourly here, we've been consolidating in this super, super tight range. And as it currently stands, we are expecting, or at least I'm expecting, if I jump out here on the daily, a push above the 50 moving average here on the daily time frame, which is currently at right around $89,000. So I'm going to be watching this here, especially on the 4-hourly. Any sort of break above this $88,000 range, I think could send Bitcoin through, or could potentially trigger an impulsive move to send Bitcoin through that next level here, which we're looking at, which is right around that $90,000 range. Again, I'm going to have a separate video breaking this down, but just want to take the opportunity to say thank you for anybody that's tuning in here for the very first time. So people like Triple, it means a lot. I know we're just having a conversation there in the chat. Hopefully I'm able to make my way out there once I'm able to take some profits. I saw Didi in the house here, David, Cardano with Paul was also here earlier. I just want to take the time to just say thank you again. If it's your first time stopping by, my goal is to help you find your footing here, not just within the Cardano ecosystem, but also covering Bitcoin and just any of the big events going on here in this space. So if you enjoy and appreciate content like this, please make sure to smash that thumbs up on the way out. If you want more, consider subscribing. Of course, if you want to stay up to date with the latest, make sure to turn on those bell notifications. And as always, if I've missed anything, maybe you just want to suggest something, feel free to voice off in that comment section down there as well. That'll do it for this stream. I'll have some content coming out later tonight. Be on the lookout for that. But that said, you guys enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I'll catch you all in the next one. Cheers, everybody. Take care.